Good afternoon, YouTubers. This is Steve Bradley coming to you from sunny and hot Escondido, California. This afternoon it's baking hot. It's about 101 degrees, and so I hope you're cooler than we are. In any event, I want to introduce the Gospel of Matthew today to you and explain what it's about and what it's for. Matthew is the first book in the New Testament, and it was written by a man named Matthew, who is also called Levi. We meet Levi in chapter 9 of Matthew's Gospel, and there he is a tax collector. So he was a subcontractor for the Roman government who collected taxes for them. He was not a very well-liked man amongst the better parts of society because no tax collector was. In fact, they usually lumped the tax collectors together with the prostitutes and the lower classes of society as the dregs. So here's Matthew, a wealthy man, but a tax collector. We think that Matthew was written somewhere in the mid-60s AD, probably about 35 years or so after Jesus died and rose from the dead. Matthew's goal was to show that Jesus was and is the anointed king, the king over the nation of Israel. And he says that in his very first verse. He says, this is the record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And so the very first thing Matthew says is, Jesus is the Messiah. He's the anointed king. He's the Davidic king whom God was to send to his people Israel to rule over the nation, and who is the king of prophecy. And Matthew records many of Jesus' major teachings. That's one of the main features of the Gospel by Matthew. He records the Sermon on the Mount, which is very long, very well put together, and a beautiful sermon altogether. Then he records the parables in Matthew chapter 13, which is one of the longest chapters in the New Testament. And then finally he records the Sermon on the Second Coming, which is often called the Olivet, because it was given on the Mount of Olives, we think. The Olivet Discourse, and that comprises about 2 full chapters of the Gospel by Matthew. Of course, like all of the other writers in the New Testament, Matthew records the main features of Jesus' ministry, and he also records the circumstances of his death and devotes a great deal of time to that, and then finally his resurrection and what happened after that. So when you read Matthew, what you're going to find is that Matthew takes the facts of Jesus' life and treats them as though they are real facts. He doesn't tell us that this is some legend. He tells us that this is the truth. Matthew's emphasis is to show that Jesus fulfilled Old Testament prophecy, and that he is the person about whom the entire Old Testament prophesies. For example, in Matthew chapter 1, verse 22, and again I'm looking down at my notes and I apologize for having to do that, but I don't have as good a memory as some, so I hope you'll tolerate that. It says, now all this, that is the preceding information, took place to fulfill what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall be with child, and shall bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which translated means God with us. So every time one of these major events takes place, Matthew typically goes in with the prophecy that it was fulfilling. Some of them are a little obscure to us, but to Matthew, they were the very thing that he was trying to discuss. So Jesus is the fulfillment of all the Old Testament prophecies. And he discusses that with us often. And then finally, like all the other Gospels, Matthew, and I know I said this before, but I want to emphasize it, Like all the other Gospels, Matthew records the ministry and the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He records that resurrection in terms that you can't miss. And it's very important to understand this, because there are so many people who say, well, it's not really all that important to know that Jesus rose from the dead. But here's Matthew. The first thing he says is, in Matthew chapter 28, is that an earthquake occurs, an angel of the Lord descends, he tears the rock away from the tomb, and the tomb is empty. And then the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who has been crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, just as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. So what we're seeing in the Gospel by Matthew is that Matthew treats the events as things that he knows to be fact. And that's a very important concept, because so many people today teach the Bible as if it is some sort of legend or myth. That's not true. The Bible is filled with eyewitness accounts of what occurred. I hope you're having a great day, and hope God blesses you today on this hot Sunday, and I wish you all the best. And this is Steve Bradley signing off from Escondido, California.